generation. A biblical generation is about 40 years. He was crucified around about 33 AD. 40 years. 40 years. A biblical generation. 40 years from his death, burial, and resurrection, from that sign of Jonah. One generation later, the judgment did come on them. Jerusalem was burned to the ground. The temple was burned. Jerusalem was destroyed, just like he said. So he's warning them about that. He's very blunt. I guess, I think the reason he's so blunt and hostile almost with the Pharisees is because that's what it took. They were so hard-headed. He had an easier time with the sinners. He did. The sinners loved to come to him. They sensed something coming from him that they felt like they needed, evidently. That's my guess. Okay, now, we're back in chapter 16 here. Now we understand what he means by the prophet Jonas, specifically, so there's no doubt about it. Verse 4, chapter 16, verse 4, he says, "A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. There shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonas." And he means by that, alluding to his death, burial, and resurrection. "And he left them and departed. And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread." The disciples, I guess, they packed in a hurry. I don't know if you've ever left in a hurry and forgot something important. Well, they forgot to take bread. And they got to the other side, wherever they are here, and I'm sure one of them said, "Whoops, did you bring the bread?" "No." "Did you bring the..." "Oh, uh-oh, we forgot the bread." Silly us. And then Jesus said to them, "Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." And they reasoned among themselves, saying, I'm sure in a stage whisper, "It's because we forgot to take bread." See, out of the blue, he turns around and says, "Beware of the leaven of the scribes, the Pharisees, of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." Beware of it. On Jesus' mind, he's thinking back to that little encounter we just read about. He's thinking about them and their mindset. And I think he's probably replaying it in his mind and thinking about them. I think, really, it's easy to see us versus them and Jesus versus the Pharisees. I think he loved them just as much as he loved everybody else. And I think he was sort of grieved about their hard-headedness. And he said the things that he said to them out of love, and that's still on his mind. And so he turns to the disciples, and he just says to them, "Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." For them, they forgot all about the Pharisees, and now they're on to food. They're thinking about the next meal, and all they're thinking about, "Hey, did you bring the bread? I forgot the bread." So they said, "It's because we've taken no bread." They didn't understand what he said. Which when Jesus perceived, I think this is kind of fun. I imagine in my mind, if you've been around people and you all this whispering, he said, What? Just tell me, When he figured out what they're all whispering about, he said, "Oh, ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves because you brought no bread? Do ye not understand? Neither remember the 5 loaves and the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up?" Remember that? That's one of our favorite Bible stories. It was fresh, a real happening with him. He says, "Did you forget about that? And neither the 7 loaves and the 4,000, how many baskets you took up?" Twice he's done this thing where they didn't have enough bread for the crowd, and he multiplied what was present to feed what was necessary. "How is it you do not understand? I spake it not to you concerning bread." In other words, I'm not getting on to you about the bread, because, listen, if it's bread we need, we can get the bread. Don't worry about the bread. We can deal with that. Didn't you see what happened back there? But see, to them that was really important. But to Jesus, there's some things that are more important to our lives than where the next bread's coming from. And he's thinking on a much higher level. And he's worried about, or not worried, he's concerned. His concern is dealing with things that are much deeper and more far-reaching. That's why he said that. He said, "I did not speak to you concerning bread, that you should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." In other words, I'm not talking about bread when I said that. "Then understood they how he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." Now, I think this is very interesting, because he turns to his disciples, whom he cared about deeply. They are his closest associates. And he turned to them and he said, "Beware of their doctrine." Now, doctrine means you could say it means their teaching, but it's bigger than that. It means that the way they think, their doctrine, the word that's translated doctrine in the New Testament means a system of thought. means an organized system of thought. It doesn't have to be formally organized, but it's a way of thinking. That's what he's warning them about. He warned them, he said, beware of the doctrine of the scribes and the Pharisees. Now, to me, if I step back from this, it's easy just to read through, the stories and just go on right on. But when I step back and think about this, think about how the scribes and the Pharisees appeared in that day and in that culture to the ordinary people. These were the people who appeared to be the most religious, the holiest. Paul was, in his pre-conversion life, a Pharisee, and he describes what it was like. He said, concerning observance of the law, blameless. They were the strictest sect. They were so strict in observing the ordinances of the law. They were considered by most people to be the ones who have it together the most, the holiest people around. And yet here are the people that seem to be the most religious, the people who you might expect know the most about God, certainly acquainted with the Scriptures. And Jesus says to his disciples, beware of their way of thinking. Beware of their mode of thought. Beware of their doctrine. That's what that means. Beware of the mindset, to use a modern kind of lingo. So what is this way of thought? Well, a little clue is what he said to them when they asked for a sign. He called them hypocrites. Now, this same story is told in Luke's Gospel. And when Luke tells it, he says it that way. Luke says, beware of the doctrine, or beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Now, if we want to understand a little more plainly what he means, right here in this very Gospel of Matthew, he has some more to say to the scribes and the Pharisees. In chapter 23, if you turn over there just for a second. And I want to begin reading with, I think I want to start with, I don't know. How about verse 25? The whole chapter is filled with condemnation of the scribes and the Pharisees. The way it starts off, he tells the disciples, it's not so much what they're telling you, but the fact that they don't do, they tell you what Moses says, all right, but here's what he says in verse 25. Woe! Woe here means bad news. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Again, that word comes up. If you think about what a hypocrite is, we know what that means. We know the meaning of that word because we use that in everyday language. It means a person who appears to be one thing but is actually something else. Appears to be different than they are, falsifying their appearance. It comes from its origin is in the Greek theater, where they used to put on a mask, and that was where this word originated. For you make clean the outside of the cup and the platter. He says you did in your outward actions. That's a metaphor for that. You may clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but within are full of extortion and excess. There's a difference between outward and inward, he says. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first. First meaning first in priority, or first chronological. Cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter. What he's saying here is what's inside is more important. They put all the importance on outward behavior. But what's more important is inward attitude, the inward heart. He says, first, cleanse first that which is within the cup and the platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You notice how often he uses this word. For you are like whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but within, making this distinction between outward and inward, within are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. It looks clean on the outside, something decayed and bad on the inside. Even so you outwardly appear righteous unto men. Now that's a clue to their attitude, their mindset. You appear outwardly righteous unto men. That phrase, unto men, is a key thought with their thinking, what Jesus was warning about. Unto men. But within you're full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, if we'd been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers in the blood of the prophets. In other words, sure, that talk is cheap. That's what that means. Wherefore you be witnesses unto yourselves that you are the children of them that killed the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers. You serpents, ooh, this is pretty tough now. You generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, and this is, I think this next part here, is like we might say in our modern terminology, like a prophecy. He just is speaking to them in a